What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Josh, back with another video, this time on Master Duel. You guys know I haven't been doing a lot of Master Duel content on YouTube recently. I've played it a lot on stream, and people have been asking me, yo, why are you not uploading Master Duel content on YouTube as well? And I promised people I would try that as well, because I've been enjoying it a lot, especially now with the new releases today. Or the releases actually were yesterday at the time of recording, but today I've gotten to play the cards for the first time, and it was a lot of fun. And of course, I'm talking about nothing else than Spright. Spright has hit Master Duel at almost full force. We'll talk about that in a second. And it's beautiful. Everyone who's been following me in the TCG knows that I've been a huge fan of Spright. And I'm going to give you guys a little introduction on the archetype and what I think the good versions in Master Duel are, and how to play / how to prepare for it. Because I do think that at the current moment, Spright in different variations is going to be the absolute best deck in Master Duel. Before we hop into the video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'd really appreciate if you did. If you enjoy the content, you know, support the channel by subscribing and leaving a like on the video. That would mean a lot to me. But without further ado, let us start with looking into Spright. Now, as far as just standard Spright stuff is concerned, the most important thing you need to know is that it's an archetype full of level 2 monsters that extend themselves onto the field and create card advantage while doing so with a lot of great interactions. Now, if you want to have a more detailed introduction to the archetype, I have done a video on that already when that dropped in TCG. I'm not going to repeat myself because I feel like a lot of you have probably already looked into it, but if not, a link to that video is going to be up here and also in the description down below. If you're like completely new to the Spright archetype, you might want to check that out, but I did make an in-depth explanation of each of the cards. But for now, in this video, I want to focus on like different versions of Spright and what's different in Master Duel than when we got them back in the day in the TCG. And of course, the biggest thing is that we do not have Totally Awesome, and they've also preemptively hit Spright Starter. Both of those things hurt, but they don't stop Spright from being a good deck. Definitely not. So this first approach here is something that looks a lot like what we would do in the TCG when the deck released. We would just play a good level 2 normal summon in Nimble Beaver. We would use Swap Frog together with Ronin Totem because that's great value. And then we play just a Spright in good ratios, and we pair them up with strong non-engine cards. Now, this is one of the main selling points of Spright, is the fact that it has a lot of room for non-engine because it plays very, very efficiently with 1 or 2 card combos. All you need is like a level 2 monster and a Spright, or you need a Spright Starter or a Nimble Beaver, and your deck can play, and like it's very impressive what the deck can do with 1 or 2 cards. So you can afford to run all these hand traps like Maxi, Ash, Talents, Imperm. We can run stuff like Enemy Controller, which is very cool in the mirror match to take your opponent's Spright Elf if they try to interact with your monsters. You can use Cosmic Cyclone, which is mainly because of Runic Spright. I put that in here. And you have room for all these cards, and your deck is still very consistent, which is very nice. Of course, you're not going to be able to end on Toad with this version, but you can still end on very easily like Elf plus IP plus maybe Djinn Buster, maybe Red or Carrot, paired up with a bunch of like non-engine cards in the form of hand traps or cosmics or enemies. It's great. This is a very solid version of the deck. I've decided to include Pixies in this version. I think it's very good in Master Duel right now. The reason why I like Pixies is because if you make your board of Elf IP, the most common way to deal with that is to usually just summon a monster and attempt to go battle phase, because both Elf and IP are main phase only. That kind of forces them out, right? That forces people to use their effects. Now, if you use Pixies, you can simply go Elf Revive Blue, add Pixies to your hand, and now they cannot bait your IP anymore. They have to commit into it, which I think is a very cute play. The reason why that didn't come up that often in the TCG, even though I did play Pixies in some of my builds in the TCG, but most of the time you were, of course, trying to revive Toad with Elf. So reviving Blue wasn't really what you were looking to do. Now, we don't have Toad, so we don't have a great target to revive with Elf anyways, so we might as well just go for the Blue or the Jet. And so depending on the situation, you can either grab follow-up with those, or you can grab Pixies to make your board harder to break, which is why I think Pixies is very good in Master Duel. But this is what I currently have for pure Spright. Like I said, you can play around a lot with the ratios here. There's a lot of these non-engine cards that you can switch around. You can play different hand traps. I think Ghost Ogre is also a hand trap that is fairly strong because of how gigantic Spright works. You can cut Cosmic Cyclone if you don't see a lot of Runic Spright. You are super flexible. Enemy Controller is not a must-have. All of this can be adjusted according to the metagame, which I think is one of the biggest selling points of Spright. But let's look at one of the more, like, in my opinion, the best version of Spright. And of course, the deck in question is Runic Spright, the deck that I won YCS Utrecht with last year in the TCG, which was absolutely the best deck at the time. I also think is the best deck currently in Master Duel. It's basically, from what I feel like after streaming for like a couple hours today, just playing this deck, it is completely absurd. The Runic engine has insane synergy with Sprites. You're all familiar with Runics, which has been quite popular in Master Duel recently for good or bad reasons. Now, let me tell you, this deck doesn't play Floodgates, which is the good news, but this deck is still incredibly strong. So of course, you make use of the synergy between Hugin being a level 2 and all the Sprites requiring a level 2 on the field. So you have this incredible combination where you basically have 17 quick play spells in this case that can just summon level 2s and enable all your Sprite combos. And you pair that with the fact that the deck doesn't need a normal summon, so you can main deck Lava Golem, which I'm also going to show you a version without Lava Golem in a bit. But Lava Golem is a very strong card because this deck doesn't need its normal summons. You play a couple normal summons, but you don't really need to. And Lava Golem is just one of the best board breakers in the game. If your deck doesn't need a normal summon, Lava Golem is great. One thing that this deck suffers from a little bit is the fact that Maxi is in Master Duel, because of course this deck special summons a lot. It aims to special summon a lot, and that's in general the case for Spright. But I still think this deck is incredibly strong, and this is why I've adjusted the list a little bit. Of course, I've included Maxi as opposed to the list that I won the YCS with, and I've also added Called by the Grave to counter opponents' Maxis, which wasn't in the deck originally. Originally, the deck had, I believe I played 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, and I played a second copy of Iperia, and I don't remember what the other 2. I played another copy of Sprite Jet, I think one more Runic spell maybe. Oh no, a third starter, of course, a third starter, because that's semi-limited. The idea is basically this deck is incredibly hard to beat in a grind game scenario, because the standard turn 1 combo for this deck draws you around 4 to 6 cards. If you draw a normal summon, you will draw 1 card off of that normal summon. Then Gigantic is going to give you the other one. Like either you open Iperia, then Gigantic summons Capshell, or you open Capshell, then Gigantic summons Iperia. So that's 2 draws. The Runic Fountain will draw you anywhere from 2 to 3. Sometimes you can even resolve 2 fountains. So you'll draw like 4 to 5 cards off of that. And then Elf will revive Capshell on your turn, make a Djinn Buster with it, which makes it able to draw again on your opponent's turn, because you can detach Capshell from Djinn Buster. And then your Elf can also revive Iperia again. So it's literally the deck draws, and then sets up Elf, IP, Djinn Buster usually on the first turn, which is like a couple interactions, and then has all of the Runic spells to back it up, which is just quite frankly impossible to outgrind. Like it takes a lot of time for this deck to actually win, because you always skip your battle phase, but your opponent either surrenders or they eventually get decked out, even if you never find an opportunity to OTK them on a turn. But for the most part, this deck is just great. Keep in mind, this deck absolutely needs to play Wind Up Kitten because you don't have a battle phase, so you have a hard time outing monsters. So that's what the Wind Up Kitten is for, right? Is you just summon it off of Gigantic sometimes, and then you can bounce a card. And since this card is not hard once per turn, you can revive it with Elf and then bounce again. So that's how you can clear boards very efficiently. Sometimes you can even do very cute stuff like bouncing your own Lava Golem. I think it's great. But let me show you a version without Lava Golem, just in case you feel like it's not the one you want to play. This is the one without Lava Golem. Of course, without Lava Golem, you go max out on Iperia, because that card is insanely strong in this deck. Like, I would like to open that card in every single one of my hands. You could also play Ash or Called Bys instead of the Talents here, because like I said, Maxi is kind of a problem. I decided that I like Talents a little bit more, simply because it's a more high impact card, and that's something I'm also going to mention. I guess it's a good point to mention this right now when we're talking about Ash Blossom, but hand traps are not that great against Sprite, simply because of how efficient the deck is. Like, if you hand trap the Beaver and they already have a blue, then they're just going to play. If you hand trap the blue and they have another extender, they're going to play. Or they're just making Gigantic. So basically, like, you need multiple hand traps to just stop like a couple, like 1 or 2 cards. It's very, very inefficient to use hand traps against Sprite, which is why Ash is not that great. The only thing that Ash can really hit is Maxi in this format. Like, Ash is not very good against Sprite. This is why I've decided to go with Talent. So the plan of this deck is, if you get Maxied, you kind of just hope to sit on the Runic cards for a turn. You don't want to commit too much. You just go like normal summon Iperia, and then they have to activate Maxi at that point most of the time, because you could just summon your Sprites immediately. Otherwise, they don't start a chain in hand. And then if you get Maxied, you have the option to go like, okay, well, I can chain a Runic card to the Maxi to summon before they can draw. and then I can search my fountain and I can set up a couple of Runic plays for the next turn, or I can like talents to look at your hand and then reduce it down to 3 cards, which is probably manageable. Honestly, this is the one that I prefer right now. Like if I had to play in the Master Duel tournament, I would play something along this line. But Lava Golem is also very cute, but I just love Iperia in this deck. So yeah, I'm gonna show you one more version after this, but I just wanted to be known that me, as someone who's had a lot of experience with this deck, I've won a YCS with this in the TCG. I think this deck is absolutely the best deck in Master Duel right now. I don't think it's close. But I'm gonna show you another version just to give you some inspiration of what else you can do with Spright, because the deck's actually quite flexible. And that version is Life Twin Spright. Life Twin Spright is another thing that has been played a decent amount in the TCG, and actually is one of the decks that can also, in my opinion, keep up with the grind game of Runic Spright. This deck also has great synergy with Sprites because, of course, all the Life Twin main deck monsters are level 2s, and you basically add the Kisikil and the Lila line to your opening, which I think is very valuable in Master Duel right now because we don't have Toad. This is just great to have this as an alternative line. The way it works is on your first turn, you're going to be able to draw a card with Kisikil. You set up a Kisikil Frost in your graveyard to draw another card on your opponent's turn. And on your opponent's turn, you can revive the Lila with the Kisikil, and you can pop a card they control. So the Life Twins get you level 2s onto the field and get you draws and pops and interactions. It's a great synergy. The only downside of this version is that it needs to draw exactly a Life Twin and a Spright card to get into the combos. That is the downside. But if you can do that consistently, then the deck is very, very strong. Like going first against Lila plus Blue or Lila plus Jet or Lila plus Starter is like really, really hard. And you can definitely give it a try. I believe this deck is also quite strong. I've decided to include Ghost Ogre in this version because it feels quite strong. You can actually also play it in Pure Spright. I think if I had to rank these 3 versions that I showed you, I'd say Runic Spright is the best, but I can understand why people wouldn't want to play it because it's very expensive as well in Master Duel, and some people don't like the playstyle of Runic. I personally love it, but if it's not for you, then I think Life Twin Spright is the second best version and Pure Spright is the third best. There's also Tri-Brigade Spright and other versions. I mean, feel free to ask me my opinion on any given Spright variant in the comments down below. I can tell you what I think about it, but those 3 are the ones that I think are the best. And then behind it somewhere is Tri-Brigade Spright. That's my assessment on which Spright version is how good. So yeah, if you want to learn more on how to play Spright, I highly encourage you to check out, like I said, the introduction that I made when they were released in the TCG. Link to that is in the description below. But also, I've been playing a lot of this on my recent streams. Just off today, we played multiple hours of Spright. So if you want to check out the VODs to any of my Twitch streams, you can either head over to Twitch directly, or you can also check out the VOD channel that I have on YouTube where I upload all my Twitch VODs. The link to that is also going to be in the description below. I hope these lists give you some inspiration and you can play around with Spright a bit. I'm personally a huge fan of Spright because it's a very interactive archetype. Of course, it's very powerful, but it also, the Spright monsters aren't the biggest, so it's not really like this, oh, I'm going to OTK you every time, I'm going to negate all your stuff. It's a very interactive archetype, which I'm a huge fan of. And I hope it's going to stick around in Master Duel for a long time. I think the Toad ban, as much as it hurt me deep in my soul, was a good decision because it makes the deck a lot less oppressive and actually very fun. I had a great time today playing with different Spright variations. I hope you enjoy it as well. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, once again, please consider subscribing to the channel. I would appreciate if you did that. And I'll see you guys either on the next stream or on the next YouTube video. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Peace.